Slayers truly are an integral part of Hypixel Skyblock. They've been the main focus for a lot of people for years upon years now. Over time, Skyblock has changed, and the question must be asked, are Slayers still good for money in 2025? Players have built entire profiles around just simply doing one Slayer, but nowadays with the rise of habanero tactics, and the relative reduction in value of Slayer drops, where do Slayers really stand? Well, saying Slayers do or don't make money is way too vague considering there's quite a few different Slayers, so yeah, we're going to go through and see which ones are still good for money. Starting with Revs, one of the easiest Slayers to do. From Revs, the main drops that you'd be looking to get will be a Warden Heart, a Shard of the Shredded, Smite 7, and then a Scythe Blades. Foul Flesh can definitely add up as well, along with Revenant Viscera. Now, believe it or not, 130 million coins for a Warden Heart is actually really high at the moment. Just a month ago, they were down at 90 million coins. Now, what are the perks of doing Revs? Well, it's quick. It's really quick to spawn the boss, and it's really quick to kill the boss. The age-old issue with determining if a Slayer is profitable or not is, of course, how good your RNG is. And while Revs always used to be good for money in terms of making profit, with the drop in prices of the best drops, people simply stopped doing Revs. But then the other side to that is less Warden Hearts, less drops being put on the market, therefore prices going up because there's less supply. In terms of profit, if you're looking for an easier Slayer, I probably wouldn't go for Revs at the moment. Before we go any further, at the moment we're actually trying to beat the population of Andorra with subscribers. The population of Andorra is around about 80,000 people. Once we reach 80,000 subscribers, we'll be visiting Andorra and we'll be able to claim that we have more subscribers than the population of the whole country, which would be pretty cool, so make sure to subscribe to make that happen. Also, if you are planning on purchasing anything from the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS, it gets yourself 5% off. You should also join the Discord server, it's linked in the description of this video. We offer Slayers and Dungeon carries, so if you need carries or want to carry and make some coins, make sure to join. How about Wolf Slayer? Surely Wolf Slayer is slightly better than Revs. Well, Overfluxes are down at 60 mil, and they were even cheaper at one point. And other than your 60 mil Overflux, you've not really got much else, to be completely honest. You've got hamster wheels that will make you a little bit of money back too. Let's be completely honest, we can't really consider Celeste die, even though it is the most expensive die in the game, it just ain't happening. Now, in my experience from getting to Wolf 9, I believe I made around about 200, maybe 250 million coins for a lot of hours of grinding. That was also when Overflux was a lot more expensive than it is nowadays. I think I sold mine for 100 mil back in the day. While you're not going to really lose money from doing Wolf Slayer, it's not really very good for profit. And surprisingly, out of the easier Slayers, Tarantula might just be your best bet in terms of making money. Now that might seem a little bit nonsensical, considering the most expensive drop from Spider Slayer is 1 million coins. However, the speed at which you can actually spawn and kill these bosses, combined with putting your meter on Toxic Arrow Poison, means you can actually make some decent money. And while most people are definitely not going to be doing Spider Slayer here, if you're able to do it in the Crimson Isles, then it will be much quicker. These spiders give a ton of combat XP, making the bosses ridiculously quick. Now, out of the 3 core Slayers, if you are chasing the big RNGs, then I'd probably do Revs. But for consistent money, surprisingly, Tarantula is probably the choice. I'm going to move on from the main 3 Slayers, or the core 3 Slayers, onto Enderman Slayer. Now, Enderman Slayer is a popular choice. Of course, if you drop a Judgment Core, your quid's in, it's 202 mil. However, this is way lower than it used to be. You've got other decent drops, like Ender Slayer 7, which is 60 mil, and Enchant Rune, which I probably wouldn't really put into the category of a decent drop considering its rarity. And maybe a couple of other things here and there that might make you a little bit of money back. But of course, the main chase is definitely the Judgment Core. On my journey to E-Man 9, I made just shy of 1.5 billion coins, dropping 6 Judgment Cores. In other words, on average, I profited around about 885,000 coins per boss. Well, I actually did make more from that, but this is all taking current prices, which is actually probably makes it better. Now, the big difference between something like E-Man Slayer and then compare that to something like Zombie Slayer is basically how you kill the boss. Zombie Slayer, Tarantula Slayer, Wolf Slayer is very straightforward. E-Man Slayer is not difficult, you just need to get the hang of it, and for me it took a long time to get the hang of. Now, for me, Enderman Slayer is obviously really good when you hit the big drop, but you are relying on those big drops carrying basically the rest of your profit. Now, you're not going to lose money from doing Enderman Slayer, and I'm sure if you're more efficient than me with killing the bosses, then obviously you're going to make even more money in a shorter period of time. Of course, what we're not taking into account is basically how many of these bosses I could kill per hour, then we could work out an hourly rate, which I can do, to be fair. My boss times were roughly about 30 seconds per, and then spawn was probably 20 seconds to 30 seconds, which means I was roughly making around about 50 million coins per hour from E-Man. In reality, it was probably less than that because a lot of XP was done when I wasn't as efficient, and to be honest, you could definitely do it even quicker than I did it. Anyway, let's move on. Now, everybody knows that Blaze Slayer used to make a ton of money back in the day, but how does it fare nowadays? Now, I'm not Blaze 9 yet, but I'm not far away, and I've done quite a lot of Blaze bosses, so we should be able to get a decent look at how good it really is for money. But what can you even get from Blaze Slayer? Well, you have two of the rarest drops, which are basically worthless. The main drop that you want to get is, well, the high class dice, which is going to sell for between 35 to 40 mil. I believe it's roughly a 1 in 420, 430 drop-ish. Don't quote me on that, I think it's slightly different. But it's between a 1 in 420 and 1 in 450. Which, if you compare that to other main RNGs, is actually not very rare. Other things that are going to make you some money are duplex books, which used to be, 6, 7 mil, probably even more back in the day. Now, they don't really go for too much anymore, being 1.6 mil, so that's kind of annoying. You've got Archfiend dice, which is just basically a lesser version of the high class. They sell for 5 mil each, so that's nice as well. You've got Scorch Power Crystals, which are between 1 and 1.5 mil per. Distillate makes you quite a lot of money too, along with the Derelict Ash that you get from every single boss. Now, the great thing about Blaze is, even if you're not dropping good RNGs, you're still making a lot of money. And here's the reality. In terms of Blaze, I've done 1,510 bosses, and at current value, I've made 1.85 billion coins back. We've dropped 14 high-class dice, made almost the same amount from the dice in Derelict Ash, 270 million Distillate, 170 million in Archfiend dice, 135 million Scorch Power Crystals, over 100 million in Duplex and Magma Cream Distillate 2. Even though there isn't that one RNG that you can hit and you're like, wow, crazy, like a Judgment Core, there's many other things that basically build up to pretty much things that are better. On average from Blaze, I profit around about 1.225 million coins, which is, around about 50% more than E-Man Slayer. And the ironic thing is that at E-Man 9, I think I was relatively lucky to get 6 cores, and my rates for high-class dices are not very good at all, considering I'm not very far away from Blaze 9. But there's other things that you have to consider. I can't speak on behalf of everyone, but for me, and for majority of people, your spawn and kill times for Blaze probably gonna be longer than they are for E-Man. If I could get a 50 to 60 second spawn and kill for E-Man, then for Blaze, my bosses are 50 seconds because I've not learned how to do the skip. And then my spawns are probably 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds. So my boss times are, around about 33% more longer? Which means that, funnily enough, our hourly rate, roughly, for Blaze is actually the same as E-Man, 50 mil. But in my opinion, the best thing about Blaze is you don't have to rely on having good RNG. Like I said, I feel like compared to other people, for Blaze, I have bad RNG. Or if not bad, probably somewhere around about mid. Whereas for E-Man Slayer, I feel like I had pretty good RNG. And that for me is probably the only thing that is pulling the numbers up so high for E-Man Slayer. But nevertheless, I mean, that's over a test period of around about 1,500 bosses each. And they're the numbers. Now, just to make it fair, I'm going to go over the figures that I've got for the first 3 Slayers as well. Revs, Spider Slayer, and also Wolf Slayer. In terms of how much money I've made. I mean, this isn't going to be lifetime because I used Badline for majority of the time that I was doing Revs. But from this test period of 1,300 bosses, we made 188 mil. That's a profit of 145k per boss. If we approximate our kill time to be a couple of seconds, our spawn time to maybe be 20 seconds, we'll say 25 seconds per boss spawn and kill. That's roughly around about 21 mil per hour. Although I would strongly consider that included in these numbers, I must have got pretty lucky because over those 1,200, 1,300 bosses, I got a 1 heart, 5 scythe blades, 4 shard of the treadings, and 3 smite 7s. And that's not really the usual. We can do the same for Sven's here as well. We did 2,060 bosses. We dropped 1 overflux, hamster wheels, and so on. We made 173 million coins, which is 83,000 coins profit per boss. Our spawn and kill would be probably quite similar to Revs, considering the kill time is just a couple of seconds because you can one-tap it. And the spawn is not really all that bad. I mean, I did my friends in the park. Being a little bit lenient and probably generous, that's 10 million coins profit per hour. But Tarantula Slayer, for whatever reason, my mods have decided to just not ever track any of my Spider Slayer. So we don't have any figures, so we've got to get a bit creative. If you put your meter on Toxic Arrow Poison, you need 3,277 Slayer XP. In other words, you get 500 XP per boss, so that's going to be 7 bosses, basically. Well, we'll call it 6.5 because that's what it really is. Now, obviously, that is disregarding sort of just getting Toxic Arrow Poison anyway. Now, from tier 4s, you get between 64 and 60, so we'll take it as 62. And if you have a Hyperion, and an Aurora set or a Storm set, and you can kill the spiders relatively easily in the Crimson Isles, which you will be able to if you have a Hype and somewhat regular magical power if you've got a Hype and Aurora, you could probably get the spawn and kill down to somewhere between 5 and 10 seconds per boss. And to be honest, it probably makes sense to say that you could easily do a boss every 10 seconds. Which means just from meter, you should be able to get 372 Toxic Arrow Poison. Which means just from meter, you should be able to get around about 62 Toxic Arrow Poison per minute. Times that by 60 and that's 3,720. Which would equate to just less than 8 million coins per hour. If we add an extra maybe 2 mil of Toxic Arrow Poison on top for, well, not meter drops. Plus, with pretty normal RNG, you're going to be dropping things like Fly Swatters and Tarantula Talismans relatively frequently. I'd say 15 million coins an hour is probably around the figure that you'd make from Spider Slayer if you've got a Hype. I haven't got the figures, this is more of an estimation, this isn't an exact science, so I might be off either way. But that's not relying on any good RNGs at all. Anyway, last but not least, we're going to move on to the Rift and, well, Vampire Slayer. What can you get from Vampire Slayer? Well, you can get the 1 book, but this requires you to grind tier 5 Vampire Slayer, which for most people just probably isn't going to happen. You've got Unfanged Vampire Parts, which is probably going to be your main moneymaker. Not really anything else that's going to make you that much. Now, your Unfanged Vampire Part can craft a Vampire Dentist Relic, which at the moment is selling for 35 million coins. Considering you get 150 Vampire XP per boss, and for you to meter an Unfanged Vampire Part, that's going to cost you around about 18,500 Vampire Slayer XP. This drop is around about a 1 in 123. Well, that's if you have to meter it every time, which you probably won't. Now, due to the profit tracker also being questionable, we're going to have to estimate. Because Vampire Slayer is not really the most fluent thing to do. It's not the easiest thing to do. It doesn't always go to plan. You're not going to be able to kill vampire bosses for an hour straight to try and decide how much money you're going to make. It just doesn't happen like that. Sometimes you've got to go in and out of the rift. If you do die, which is relatively common, you've then got to work your way out of the dungeon. Then spawning it takes a while too. Let's be generous and say you could do 20 tier 4s per hour. If you were to meter the Unfanged Vampire Part, then that's going to take you 6 hours of doing Vampire Slayer, roughly. Or 5.5 mil per hour. But you're probably going to drop a few other things along the way. Let's probably be generous once again and say you make maybe 8, 9, maybe 10 mil an hour. There's good reason why not many people choose to do Vampire Slayer for money. But anyway, a Slayer's still worth doing in 2025. Absolutely. Absolutely they are. And to be honest, some of the results actually surprised me. And I don't know if they surprised you or not. And I will say that just because that is the data that I've got from my bosses, doesn't mean you're going to get the same from your bosses. Different magic find, different boss speeds, and so on. But if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.